Good morning. Welcome to a tertiary world. Today I begin reading from the memories that arose as I walked down Faraday Street in 2008. I'm reading all of this from an exotic location, not in Mildura, by the sea in Lorne. I've been painting the walls of this taverna. It's been wonderful to be near the ocean. Faraday Street is the 7th of 7 east-west streets, the 14th street, the last street of this particular journey. Its colour is violet. This is the first memory. Its colour is red, the corner of Faraday and Lygon Street. Even back in the 50s, King and Godfrey were the only liquor merchants that sold wine in regular sized bottles. Elsewhere you could only buy wine in 1-gallon flagons, and then only rough red wine. In Trieste, we'd lived around the corner from a small wine merchant who operated from the basement of a 4-story apartment building. In summer, the cool basement was heady with the vapours of young wines that had spilled from the dark, oily barrels onto the concrete floor. On hot summer mornings, I would love standing just inside the doorway, still plunged in deep shade, while the sun blazed away somewhere on the other side of the street. I would just sit on a box or whatever was available and take in the movement of barrels, the sudden silence when one was open to have its contents tasted, and the murmur of approval or the disdain of rejection once the tasting was completed. Perhaps for this reason I felt a strange kinship with King Godfrey, though here there were no barrels in sight, no brawny men with ragged dark blue singlets rolling them up inclines, no heady fragrances of fermenting brews. Elsewhere in the building, a succession of radio stations occupied the various upstairs rooms through the 60s. Radio 3XY, Radio 3AK, and others. They seemed to come and occupy the building whilst at the top of their popularity, and within a few months vacate the premises, having in the meanwhile dramatically lost many listeners. I'm not quite sure why this was, but I heard someone fancifully speculate one day that with all the new eating places that had sprouted everywhere during this period, radio presenters would return from the newly acquired habit of the long lunch, unusually inebriated. They would then proceed to make fools of themselves on afternoon radio. In the 80s, the wine merchants expanded their premises to include a delicatessen specialising in the very best cured meats and cheeses, pasta, olive oils and other delicacies. At the beginning this was a great novelty, but I soon stopped going to shop there because everything eventually became too expensive. Last year, Aldo, the owner, sold out and left, I think, to retire somewhere in the country, so that finally all the links have been severed with the shop's origins. But I occasionally still go inside to buy cheap white wine from the Riverina. Its price has not escalated in the last 10 years, and it's still stored in exactly the same shelf, in exactly the same refrigerated cabinet. On such occasions, it can feel a little like the old wine merchant shop, as people stand around talking about trivial things, and cars drive by the large windows below a sky that somehow has once more been crammed with innocent clouds. It almost feels like I'm buying the very same bottle over and over again. Once emptied, it has somehow been retrieved, filled, and returned to its position on the shelf in order to maintain one infinitesimally small part of the world in perpetual balance. Since 2008, of course, this corner establishment has been once more returned to its family business, the Valnorbida, and it's now a cafe and a restaurant, as well as a delicatessen. Cycles keep turning. The 5th Faraday Street memory, its colour is blue, 68 Faraday Street. The advertisement in the newspaper stood out a mile, $48 a week, a large space in central Carlton, it said. It was 1978 and I took it straight away. At first it stayed empty, filled only with a Kawaii Grand I had just bought on hire purchase and with pots of brushes and boxes of paints. Eventually, I lived there for 10 years. What do I remember most about 68 Faraday Street? The icy cold winters spent listening to a faulty tap that used to run all night, making a strange gurgling sound, like someone trying hard to breathe. In the end, transmuting itself to the most comforting presence. The rasping, breathless sound of masking tape unfurling from its roll as boxes destined for faraway parts of the world were being packed downstairs amidst violent shouting fights between the many family members who owned the business. The morning light that used to flood the interior through huge windows facing south, and the tears that at times flooded my pillow. The rain that beat down on the iron roof so loudly one had to shout to be heard as my children and I huddled together in bed, watching the TV turned up loud. The golden light reflected from the white fluorescence fixed to the raw pine ceiling. The downstairs front door slammed over and over again, taxi drivers outside my windows chatting endlessly in unintelligible languages as they finished their shift in the middle of the night. The first trams rolling along Nicholson Street's dewy tracks in the pitch black winter mornings. Listening to the telephone ringing incessantly in the middle of the night, counting the number of shrill rings, then lying awake till first light, considering everything, counting it all, numbering each small event in my small life. And here I am in Costas once more, painting the walls that I had begun to paint in 1983 and kept painting at one point once each year. Then there was a break, and here I am again. Today is all about cycles repeating themselves, but every day is all about cycles repeating themselves. Until tomorrow, as I continue the cycles through my readings of the tertiary.